Hey everyone, welcome, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. How's everyone doing today? Amazing. I know we're gonna have some folks kind of flowing into the room. Good to see some familiar faces. Looks like we got some new ones as well. Great to have y'all. Love it. Cool. We're gonna kick things off in just a second. To introduce myself, I'm Tori. I'm the community director here at Farmers Footprint. It's a pleasure to be with y'all today, and I just want to start with huge gratitude for everyone jumping in and making some time to have this conversation and listen. I mean, I think a really fun part for me on these ones is just kind of working with the fact that we have 2 ears and 1 mouth. So nice to kind of embody that ratio and have fun in that sense. So on that note, Del, thank you so much for coming in and having a conversation with us. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me.
Amazing. Yeah, it's a true honor. And I think we really, really appreciate you sharing your time with us. So thank you so much for being here.
Of
And
course.
then I'd also just like to jump the mic over quick to Georgie Smith, who's on our Circle of Creatives. Hey, Georgie.
Hi, I'm so happy to be here again. It's always fun chatting with the Farmers Footprint community.
Awesome. Well, we are lucky to have you in the room as well and your expertise. So I love that. I'd love to know also who else is here today. So we do one fun thing where we call them spring chickens. So if this is your first ever Farmers Footprint event, go ahead and drop that spring chicken in the chat. And then also let's kind of hear where everyone's coming from. I know I see some of our global community in the room. So go ahead and drop in maybe where you're based today and what brought you to the conversation. Like what is interesting to you to spend your time with us. So we'll take a few minutes. Oh, we got a spring chicken emoji, Doyle. I love it. Awesome. And as you guys are typing that out, we'll go ahead and just start rolling. Appreciate it. It's really fun actually to see like Ireland and Australia and all these things come through. So I love it. I love it. Awesome. So essentially today what we're going to do, I want to take you guys a bit through where we're headed. I'm going to give a little bit of an introduction to just set the stage. And then Georgie and Del are going to jump into just conversation. We're going to get a little bit deeper on Del's story. He's going to take us behind the scenes on the incredible work that he's doing in Nebraska at the Ficke Cattle Company and beyond. So super excited for that piece of it. And then I want to then give and make sure we have space for you guys to ask your questions directly to Del. So today there's going to be the really cool option to raise your virtual or real hand, jump off mute and get a chance to like have a chat with Del directly, which is pretty beautiful. He's a busy guy. So really appreciate that and don't sleep on that opportunity. So go ahead and be thinking as we're going along of your questions. A little bit past the halfway mark in the hour, we'll go ahead and transition to questions coming through from you guys. So super excited to have y'all here. It's going to be really fun. And then at the end, we're going to stick around for just a couple extra, like 15 minutes or so, just with the intention of, you know, we all go to so many webinars and they're amazing and you leave super inspired and there's kind of nothing to do with that feeling. So in the spirit of really building deeper connections and relationships in this community, we just want to hold a little bit of a container to just chat a little more, like what came up? Are you curious? Are you excited? What is your next step? All that good stuff. So I'll be there. Hopefully some of you guys will too. Awesome. So just a quick little bit in case, because I know we do have some spring chickens in the house. So just for those of you that haven't heard of Farmers Footprint yet, just want to share a smidge that, you know, we're really trying to, and we're excited and honored actually to be a part of this movement and coalition building within the regenerative agricultural space. So ways that we're trying to, you know, get involved and engaged and kind of lead from a place of servant leadership in that way is through storytelling. So enter stage right. Georgie Smith is an incredible member of our Circle of Creatives initiative. So Georgie is a 4th generation farmer, 20+ year farmer herself, based north of Seattle, Washington. And she's so incredibly well versed in really all aspects of farming and food. So if it has to do anything with food or clothing or the built world, she's interested. So definitely reach out or take a peek at her writing work. And she had a chance to drop in with Del and interview him and then go ahead and write the Meet a Farmer blog piece and feature. So that's really exciting. I'll drop that in the chat for y'all in case you haven't had a chance to get to know Dell's story from that avenue. This would be a really great way to dive a little bit deeper after today's chat. Yeah, and then I'll go ahead and share a video that was co-created by another member of our Circle of Creatives. She's also on the Farmers Footprint team. She's an incredible creative. Her name is Leah Marasovich, and she was able to visit Dell, get some amazing shots of him on the land. So you'll see the photography and videography come through in that sense. So yeah, that's a little bit about what we're doing. Just again, super grateful to have y'all. If this is your first event, jump in the community. We're hosting fun things like this as we go along. Awesome. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and we'll set the stage, and I'll kind of just, if you have a cup of tea, grab it. It's going to be a fun little ride of 3 minutes. You get to see Dell on the land. So yeah, let me see if I can get that live. Can you guys see this? Okay, perfect. I'm gonna go ahead and minimize some of this. Here we go.
If we get the soil right, we change all of society. Because when everyone starts touching the soil again, soil is a healer, it's a drug, it provides everything we need. Good soil raises good plants that are good food. I'm Del Ficke from Ficke Cattle Company and Graze Master Genetics in Pleasantville, Nebraska. I'm a nature lover and a seeker of all balance in this deal. Even though we're all from an agrarian base, we're all from the soil, over the generations, we've kind of lost that. This entire industry needed a change, get away from the industry type concept and get back to the community and farm and family. Our goals at Ficke Cattle Company are entirely different than they were 15 or 20 years ago, where we were trying to do things on a larger scale and thought we were doing a lot of things right. Even though we had started down that path way back in 1999, it wasn't until 10 or 15 years ago that it really clicked that we need to do something better. We need to be the example. I talk and talk and talk on the cow deal, but that used to be 100% of what I thought about. And now it's really even with the soil and the cow deal. Well, livestock grazed incorrectly is hard for the environment. Livestock grazed here is an absolute must to keep this soil and everything alive. We just want to be that voice of the transition, because there's people that have done a bunch of regenerative stuff. And so when someone hasn't done it, they come out and they're like, I'm never going to be able to do that. But we want to basically like take people by the hand and say, hey, we're in this together. It's baby steps. Once you get started, it's all going to flow really easy, but don't make the mistakes we did.
So beautiful. Wow. That just lights me up and makes me really excited for this conversation. So, wow. Thank you so much for jumping in. And I want to make sure that I covered everything. Yes, we did. Amazing. Georgie, I'm so excited to pass the mic to you and can't wait for you to jump in and share more about Dell. Thank you so much. Please take it.
No worries. Always happy to be here. I get to have fun. Dell and I just get to talk more, which is always fun. So Dell, I'm so honored to, be here and introduce you to the Farmers Footprint community. I first learned about, I think I had told you this before, but I first learned about your work because I was writing another piece about forage-based cows. And I ran into some of your, the Graze Master Genetics information. And I thought that was really interesting because humans have always been influencing the genetics of what we raise since the, beginning of farming. We've been selecting animals and plants and really have been insanely successful of that as far as producing more and better quality food. But that's also come with like some really terrible unforeseen consequences on many levels, like the commodity cows we talk about in your piece and their impact on ranching economics and then soil health. So, I was really excited to tell a bit more about this story because, I think people who haven't actively been involved in growing food themselves maybe don't really geek over it like you and I do, but the genetic aspects of it and the influence. But is really, interesting for me to be able to tell that story to a larger audience. But also what is really great about your story is how that all flowed into this whole large, much more profound arc about your family history, really what you're getting back to what make farmers and ranchers, not just producers, but custodians of the land in really like a nature first, diversified way. So I'm really excited to be able to hear to talk and let tell the Farmers Footprint community a little bit more about you. And I sort of wanted to jump into sort of like the main arc of your story so people get an idea of that before we get going. So I'm going to just do some quick highlights and feel free to jump in if I get anything wrong. So your family has been farming and ranching in Nebraska since they settled in the area in 1869. Your son and daughter-in-law are sixth generation of your family to farm the land and currently run the cattle side of the business. You guys raise about 100 cows on just under 500 acres land. Your family barely survived the 1980s farm crisis year when millions of US farmers and ranchers lost their farms. You took over the farm as a young man and increased your acreage. You were at one point crop farming close to 7,000 acres, which is an incredible amount, along with running the cattle, but still weren't making a profit. You were forced to quit farming, mostly due to serious back problems that really, pushed the envelope. But that eventually led you to reconsider your lifelong passion for raising cattle. And you and your father started selecting for cows that could thrive on pasture alone without the grain, veterinary care, and lots of extra expense that were coming with cows at the time, and still do for most ranchers. As your cows have genetically become better selected to thrive on grass, you started using that, there was natural tendencies to regenerate your farmland. Now you and your son and daughter-in-law use regenerative grazing techniques. You move your cows often from field to field and incorporated other regenerative practices such as seeding your land, letting the cows actually, what you call it, translocate the seed back into the fields. And this has increased your soil health and led to a much better grass quality, water holding capacity. Oh, there's my phone, sorry. And revival of your natural prairie species. I don't know where it is. Oh, there it is. Sorry.
Weren't you told to just silence that and stuff?
I know, I thought my phone was in the other room. That was dumb. Here, I'll turn it off while we're chatting. Anyways, but you now work as a consultant. That gives you, so your daughter-in-law and your son are running the farm side. So that allows you to work as a consultant, traveling all over, talking about regenerative ag, like we were talking before we came live here. And I think finally you credit much of your philosophy and how it's changed towards farming to your grandparents, especially your grandfather, Adolf Ficke, right? I said it right?
Yes.
I always have to think about it, that had a much more working with nature philosophy towards farming. And that sort of disappeared with the advent of chemicals and extractive methods of farming that began post-World War II. So did I cover all the big highlights? Anything I missed?
Yeah, so that was great. That was a great, view from up above. A couple things that stand out, we're less than 500 acres, but half of that is farm ground we don't even utilize for our cow herd. So when you start thinking about running 100 cows on about 250 acres, and we graze about 11 months out of the year, it's, if we get rain, this last year we didn't get any rain. Doesn't look like it's going to be much better. Not high desert country, but certainly not eastern Nebraska country. One thing I really want to point out is conventional type farming people really get, as I always have been, a bit hung up on how many generations we're here. None of that means anything, because if we don't get it right, there's not going to be any more generations coming in agriculture. Many civilizations have risen and fallen because we've depleted the resources. So we don't have a lot of time to get this right. But yes, long answer to a short question. That was a great overview.
Well, great. Thanks. See what I can do. Well, I'm going to sort of jump into some of these questions for the community. And one of the first ones I sort of wanted to focus on was how, looking at how you have essentially chosen cows to help to build the soil and how that's worked. So let's get into little details of those. So like, what are you looking for when you select cattle for your farm? And how do those cattle engage differently with the land than like a typical commodity type cow? And how has that really underpinned this transformation in your farming approach?
Well, all cattle are good for the soil when the grazing is correct. So conventional cattle that could be, that you could ease into a regenerative type deal, because all cattle graze on grass at some point. We're just trying to have the cattle always on grass and not in a pen that's dusty or muddy or anything like that. So, we went from a registered operation. When I say registered, it was like breed society type deal in the Hereford world, and then transitioned this into creating our own breed, trying to build the perfect beast, if you will, that is suited for what we're doing. Now, this, I'll get right to the dirty words of my talk. Right now, I look for any cow that can poop and pee, because those nutrients are so beautiful for rebuilding the soil, and we need that hoof action. We've had tons of environmentalist type people come to our place. They may have came, with the idea that we were doing things wrong. When they left, they were like family, because they just didn't quite understand that we needed that hoof action from those cows to keep those prairie grasses from matting down and suffering or smothering out other species that want to come. So, all cows work. All cows need a little lead time into it, some baby steps. I'll talk about baby steps a lot, because I'm basically a plunger. And when we came into this regenerative deal, we lost a lot of equity because we thought we could change everything immediately. And what we found out was that, the cattle were getting close to being suited for what we were doing. The soil was completely confused. It was on life support, from chemicals and synthetic fertilizers and things like that. And the first year, the weeds were even confused and didn't know how to grow in that new environment. So you live and learn, and you get to be an old timer like me. You get to be a little wiser every day.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting too, like some of the things that you've done with your cows, like just selecting for cows that have a lot, longevity, like, you can have out in the fields for longer, that don't need the antibiotics and all the grain to be able to reach, like, especially cows that don't need that to be able to reach the harvest weight. That's where a lot of farmers are trapped right now. And that affects their ability, of course, to be able to apply these regenerative practices as well, because there's so much expense involved with all that extra. Yeah. So I also wanted to follow up sort of from your perspective, kind of get into that. It seems so, like, I think from a lot of times from a non-farming community, when you think about these regenerative practices and all the, on every level, from farm economics, soil and land health, the welfare of the animals, it seems like a super, like, well, why isn't everybody doing this? And you sort of spoke to this a little bit already, but I wanted you to speak to a little bit about why are the majority of ranchers and the vast majority of beef producers in the country, why aren't they all just like going, well, of course we should all be doing regenerative? Why are they stuck in this, commodity situation with the feedlots? And can you explain to the audience sort of the pressure points that keep ranchers there, and maybe the bright spot to where they maybe break out of that and start to move away from that?
So farmers and ranchers suffer from the Stockholm syndrome. We've become friends with our captors, and our captors maybe, I'm not saying they're bad people, but maybe didn't have our best interest at heart as families and communities, and even globally. Globally, our neighbors in other countries are really struggling with the same things we're struggling with, based on the American ag model. That I just talked on a radio show yesterday on the East Coast, and I said we have a lot of unlearning to do. The people that originally taught us through the universities and things like that, I'm not going to get into if that's a corrupt system or the money that flows back and forth, anything like that. But those people were told a certain way to educate everyone too. And I catch a lot of grief or a lot of crap over. Say, I'm trying not to swear, Georgie. You guys told me to swear. So, people ask, why do you want these people out of those positions? And I think the biggest thing is a lot of those people don't want to be in those positions, don't want to be selling the retail products, don't want to be doing a lot of these different things. I want them all back on the farm or ranch, doing things they love. We get this system right. We need more people. We have more people on the land. We have the vibrant communities that I remember as a little kid. And it just all goes hand in hand. Like I've said in the videos, we get the soil right, we change all of society. So back to we can unlearn together and we can relearn together.
I think that's a super powerful statement, and it really sort of captures the situation that we're in. And I think it's a lot of it too has to do with we are in a capitalistic society, and so there's there's people want to sell things, and you get stuck in, well, what is how do I do that? How do I want to do the science to sell something, maybe not the best process. So it's really interesting to think about it though from a larger perspective, and why farmers and ranchers haven't all just made this jump, and to understand it's such a bigger picture, I think. If you're a farmer or rancher listening to this, we talked again about that. You just mentioned the critical unlearning process. It can be super overwhelming, and you talked about taking baby steps. So what are, if they're trying to figure out how, not only how they're going to survive today, how are they going to pay their bills, this month for this year, but they also are looking to the future to try and improve that situation. Where do they start? How do they start on that journey? It can be overwhelming.
Well, and the cool thing about it now is, when we started several years ago, we didn't have all the technology, YouTube and all this stuff where you can just type something in and pull up, like, I've got a question on intensive grazing. What's intensive grazing? Well, we had to, and it was very much community type system, because you talked to someone in the state that was doing it, if you were lucky enough to find it. Now we're lucky enough to have a lot of our neighbors doing these practices, so it's a nice group to do that. But the ability to learn quicker and to make fewer mistakes is really good right now. And if they can't do anything other than change one thing on their farm or ranch, but it's talking to people like me, or talking to people that have done it, but change that one thing, or change 10% of your operation, something that if it doesn't work for some reason, they're not going to go broke. And I've got to work with a lot of bankers for our clients that they want to change. The banker is just like, no way, we've done it this way. Corn is king. We're going to, we're still living on what Earl Butts talked to all the farmers, in the 60s and 70s. And, but that I've never had a banker after we got done talking that didn't let these guys at least do 10%, because they didn't even understand, what was being asked of them. They didn't know the practices. They didn't know the potential. And it's really a longevity type plan. And, it does take 2 to 3 years and a lot of this stuff to really get it rolling. But when you're starting out, on a small percentage, if it works, you just keep building from there.
Yeah. And I do know that there is starting to be a movement, not maybe in the traditional agricultural banking system, but now we're starting to see some alternative, banking starting to, and insurance. And well, I don't know if they actually have offered much, but they keep talking about with insurance too, that supports regenerative practices, that says, hey, we're going to give you a loan if you are, if you want to put in regenerative practice. That's what we're looking for, because we think it's more resilient. You're going to be more likely to survive in the long run. And I know there's been a lot of talk about trying to get insurance to recognize some of those regenerative practices and reward farmers for those, for the ones that put in those practices, which right now our insurance system really doesn't at all for farmers. There's no outlet for that. So that's like on the larger business model that I think that is so important to understand, because it does sort of, it's great to know that, like, even just 10%, start to make that slow, like you said, baby steps change, and then go from there. Tori, did you want to jump in with any other questions, or I can ask Del a few more questions? I know we have a few more minutes till the 12:35.
Yeah, please keep rolling. I'm loving
Okay.
this.
Well, I would love to have you speak a little bit about some of the things we got into in the story. And that was about how going through this like unlearning process that you went through really made you think about like your grandparents and especially your grandfather, who really sort of, I remember you told me you used to follow in his footsteps and all the ways he farmed. So tell me about sort of that experience and how you started like realizing, wow, maybe he was really onto something.
He was a barefoot naturalist. He was anti-government. He was anti anything that wasn't very natural based. And of course, my father then, came into a different time in the operation that and followed a different route of the current, like many did. But my grandfather, he's believe in a higher power or God, whatever. I'm not going to get into all that. But I really had a calling a lot of years ago in the pastures. I can take you right to the spot where my grandfather and I used to walk a lot. And it came to me, he said, you're not the first, you're not going to be the best, but you are the most vocal and you are the most stubborn, hard-headed person. And he said, you will be able to get their attention. And I jokingly said, I kicked him in the butt and then gave him a hug. I got their attention and said, okay, now we can do this. So that's kind of my grandfather's edge, I think, coming into this. But, I learned so much about the natural flow of nature. And then I got away from that in my own operation because I too got sucked into, oh my gosh, you have this opportunity to lease all this ground. You'll never have that chance again, blah, blah, blah. Well,
farmers always looking for land. Always have to get more land. Yeah.
I'm not looking for land. I'm looking to, to do, in my lifetime, I'll never improve the few acres that I have to the way that, the natural state it was, so I never have to get more ground. I just couldn't do a good enough job in my mind. But, with all that being said, there's a lesson in that generation that my grandfather came out. I think he was born in 1906. And he, like I say, he really had a good head on his shoulders, and he had 3 brothers, and that they were my first mentors, and my father did a great job too of always connecting me with mentors that, really had big views, not local views. And so that's what's helped me right from the start.
Yeah. Great. Yeah. Well, and I love how, he said, you're stubborn and you can make them listen because that is definitely what Del he has a unique opportunity with his farm and his daughter-in-law and son running sort of the farm side of things, where he is now able to travel and talk and spread the message about regenerative agriculture really on a wide basis. And so that's pretty amazing. And I think, Tori, are you going to want to hand this over and see if we have any other questions for Del from the community? Or
Yeah, that's amazing.
Okay.
Wow. Just thank you both. I mean, that last question at least really resonated with me. I think it's so impactful and really kind of universal to start to think through like who made us who we are today. And when metaphors overlap and there's that Venn diagram with family, it gets really special. So thanks for bringing that in. That was really cool. Yeah, and guys, this is the fun part. So, well, it's all pretty fun, but it can be especially fun. So you guys have been on mute. I'm going to go ahead and allow everyone. There's just a little button I click, so now you can unmute yourselves. If you're not talking, just try and stay off mute, so it helps with like the audio for everyone else, and we can hear the questions come through. Yeah, and if you have a question direct, go ahead and you can head over to participants, and there should be a little button. The participants button is on the bottom of the Zoom bar, and then in there should be a little button that says raise hand. So you guys will be able to kind of raise your hands in that way, and I'll kind of like tee it up and we'll get you on the mic chatting with Del. So yeah, I just have a few requests for kind of like small things as we head into that. This is where I get to put on my like moderator hat. But we just kind of, to keep it respectful so that everyone can ask questions, just kind of try and keep it within like a 90-second time frame. If you start to go over that as you're asking a question, I'll just put up this little confetti sign, so keep an eye on me. Yeah, and then beyond that, let's get it going. Does anyone have any questions that are coming through right from the start? Okay, I'm seeing Annalise, so let's see if I can get Annalise to jump in. Annalise, I'm going to bring you up. Can you hear us? I can go ahead and ask you to unmute. Annalise, are you able to unmute?
Ask you a question.
Okay.
I'm in a meeting, Dad.
The remake, get rid of the remake.
There's my dad. Sorry, he doesn't understand.
Farmer,
Zoom meetings.
right, Georgie?
Come here, Dad. Come here. Since you want to be in my Zoom meeting that I'm having right now with a bunch of people? No? Okay,
No.
I'll talk to you later.
Well, I'll just, that remain in the box you
Yeah, I
want to
gotta
stick in it.
talk to you later, Dad. Okay, I'll talk to you later. Okay, it's okay. I'll talk to you later. I'm in a meeting.
Say yes or no.
You know,
Awesome. Sean, can you unmute? Are you having trouble? Okay, we got Sean. What's going on?
Yes, thank you, Tori, Georgie, and Del. A great story. And my question for you, Del, is if other farmers do not have the same appreciation for the web of life that is nature and the whole system approach, do you think that they can be successful in progressing regeneratively as you have?
I believe they will have to be. So there's two reasons why you do it, and I had both of them wrapped up in one. You do it from the heart, or you do it because your back's against the wall. And so right now, especially in the US, the commodity system is still plugging away very well. I'm saying that half sarcastically. People are still making money just off of commodity corn and beans and using synthetics and copious amounts of chemicals and things like that. We know that the next generation of people coming into hopefully our political system, but the people that are voting here in the US are that younger group that really understand more of what we're trying to do. I've said it a lot of times. I can speak to 700 fourth graders or college kids or something, and in 5 minutes or less, they understand what I'm talking about. If I talk to 700 farmers, I might get one person that kind of goes, okay. So there's a lot of things that need to happen, but I think environmentally, there's going to be even a bigger push for people to change. We're seeing that, you've seen that in other countries too. So it's hard if they're not forced into it financially, or if they don't really have it in their heart to make them change. But it also goes back to, if we just all change 10% globally, we could really change a lot. We're never going to get everyone to do it 100%.
Awesome. I see a thumbs up from Sean, who's an incredible farmer himself. Thanks for jumping in, Sean. Amazing. Cool. We had another question come through the chat that is actually a two-parter. Whoa, get ready. Okay. So Stan is really curious around any best resources that you'd recommend for creating a regenerative farm in the high arid desert, such as Wyoming, Colorado. Oh man, this is like a test from my fourth grade brain. What is the NE one again? Nebraska? That's Nebraska, right?
Oh, come on.
I know, I'm so sorry. That was a joke. Oh my gosh, did I get you? Okay, and South Dakota. All right, we have to have jokes here. This is the game that we play.
So that's kind of an easy, there's an easy answer to that. Find the people that are doing it in those areas. Like I said, when we started back in 1999, we couldn't hardly find anybody in the state that was doing, what we wanted to do. Now there's tons of people doing it. You find those people. If we, you can reach out to us if we know people in those areas, which chances are we probably do. We could connect you to talk to those guys. because they will tell you everything not to do, but they won't tell you what to do. But it's more important to know what not to do. So we can, like I said, we can help connect people, but find somebody that's been successfully doing it. And we have to remember that every region we can do regenerative practices in every region in the world, but there's not two fields alike, there's not two pastures alike, there's not two gardens alike. So just look at my place. If I step across the fence in 4 feet, it changes. So find somebody that's doing it, in whatever area you decide to, end up in that high desert country, because that's a whole different beast. Because, you're not sequestering carbon because, at a very high rate, because you don't have the moisture, and it's a fragile system. It can be done, but it takes a whole different deal than somebody that's doing it in southern Missouri.
Yeah, that's great question, Stan, and amazing answer, Del. I think we talk about this a lot in the farmers footprint community. I know it comes up a lot in farmer and rancher, and even kind of on the quote unquote like consumer side. So I love that you brought through that there's no silver bullet. So much of the success metrics and really just like the true regenerative qualities that's happening is it has to be at that local level. It has to be specific to place. So it's amazing to hear that really coming through in a positive sense from your angle. And then also just a great reminder to everyone on the call who's not a farmer or rancher, the same applies to, whatever you're thinking about and how you want to be engaged in this movement as well as a consumer or potentially an activist or anything like that. So,
and
yeah.
it gives us a great chance to become friends and neighbors again. In agriculture is driven by perception of people that they don't even talk to. And so they don't want to change anything because that person that drives by and barely waves, that, they fought over land for how many years, that's guiding their whole life. When you start reaching out to people, it becomes a very large family. And we've had that all over the world, with people coming to our place. And it's just like, we're screwing this up pretty fast, and everyone needs to be on the same page. And I think I'm still I have PTSD from seeing those communities that were so vibrant, in the early 70s be boarded up in the 80s farm crisis. And we got a chance to change that. And every person on here can do that, and has probably already done that in some way, shape, or form, because there's a lot of familiar names on this. Everyone must have been bored today and wanted to get on, but I'm grateful you did. So it's community, it's building that global type deal. It's global and local at the same time.
Yeah, eloquently said. Thank you for bringing that. Do I have an echo? Okay, I think it's gone. Amazing. I think actually a gorgeous follow-up question is coming through from Annalise. Annalise, are you able to unmute? Or would you like to? Just give her a second. Okay, I think we got you, Annalise.
Am I on?
Yeah, you're on. We got you.
Hi, sorry, driving and doing the things. Thank you. I am wondering if somebody is looking for land and anywhere in the United States, where do you is Zillow? How do you do that? How do you find land?
Local listings. I mean, wherever they're thinking about wanting to move would be the best way to do it. Certainly not going through farm management companies or anything like that. There's some good real estate people out there that could really help people. We've scouted out land for people that they were going to buy, as part of our consulting service to, they might spend, so much up front, but it might save them a whole lot in the end. So there again, find those local real estate people, the local people that or those local resources that you should be able to find, you know, whatever area you guys want to be in. I know that's kind of a broad answer.
Yeah, I'm in California right now and I don't want to look for land in California. I'd like to look someplace else. So yeah, sometimes when I'm trying to do searches online, it's just like, you know, a little sketchy and it's hard not being there, but I'm just trying to think for the future. You know, like I have an 8-year-old son and, you know, I feel like that's where I'd like to invest right now so that we can, you know,
Definitely. And
see
sorry. Just
That
kind of,
sounds good.
yeah, Annalise, I'll connect you with a few resources as well. And also if anyone else has any resources to jump in and share with Annalise, please drop them in the chat. Definitely a community source effort. So thank you so much. Thanks for jumping on. Yeah, definitely. So we're going to jump back to Stan's first question, and guys, keep the questions and curiosities coming through the chat, and then feel free to just keep raising your hand. So fun to hear your voice as well. But we had one come through the chat from Darren. So Darren, if you want to unmute and ask this in a little more detail, feel free, but I'll read it right now to give you that.
Sure.
Oh, cool. Great.
Just hi, it's great to be here with you today. Just a quick one. What role does soil analysis play, or what role did it play in your practice there?
A huge role, because we were fortunate enough to have you know, soil test or soil analysis starting back in the 50s and 60s on every acre we had. So you can't manage what you don't measure. So when you're starting these practices, you want that baseline. A Haney test works great. You know, it shows a lot of different things on a biological side. And then, so we can track not necessarily every year, but every couple of years, do tests and see, did we increase the organic matter? Did we increase the pore space? What's the water infiltration? You know, is it better than where we started, and things like that? Because it can happen quite fast, but that's a great question. If you don't measure it, if you don't know where you're starting from, you don't really know if you've made any improvements.
Definitely. Darren's second part of the question was like, what was helpful in unconfusing the soil? And I'm kind of curious, like, what are the tools in your toolbox? That's cool.
So the confusion of the soil, you know, like I said, it was really on life support with the things we were putting on it. But it's our salvation was we had a group of cows standing, you know, in the pasture, and we could plant cover crops in there that did grow and did do a great job of feeding the cow herd and starting to build the soil. But just knowing, or not looking at this as this is like a program or a set thing you have to do. This isn't, we got to plant corn in April, we got to pick it in October. Okay, what we saw was we were going to try to plant something in there without all that, you know, other stuff. That wasn't going to work. So then we went to plan B, cover crops, cows, which turned into a huge success for us because we ended up custom grazing cattle as well, and put some money back in our pocket. But we never do anything the same 2 times in a row. Like, we adapt with the weather, you know, and we adapt with what markets we're trying to, you know, if we need more beef for our program or whatever, if we want to put up more hay to bale graze or biocarbon on some poorer soil. The real big issue, or the real big key, is to not get stuck into any fixed type idea or program.
Yeah, I mean, taking cues from nature, right? Like, how do we stay adaptable and resilient, and just always those feedback loops and observation. So great answer. I love it. Thank you. We had 2 questions coming in now. I know you are the cattle expert, but folks are curious. Maybe you've come across through network, or you guys have maybe done research and tried to figure out if you want to incorporate either sheep or goats and explored their ability to stir up the soil and add to soil health as well.
So just like the more species of grasses, forbs, all that, legumes, everything that you can get out in a pasture or field, the more species that you can involve in a grazing operation, the better. So we've done hogs, we've done goats. We haven't done sheep, but we've got a lot of clients that do a lot of multi-species grazing, even adding, chickens and turkeys into that mix. In fact, the most profitable operation from a CSA standpoint, and it's been 10 years since I've been there, I think they had 15 acres and they were, grazing all those species. They had their own little plant where they could process their meat and sell the eggs and had a bakery and all that. But this was 10 years ago and they were making over $15,000 net per acre. And the soil was so crazy beautiful from all those different species, because, back to talking about weird stuff, the hogs eat the cow manure, the chickens pick through manure, but you're building soil so incredibly fast. And there's ways to do that on just the soil building side. People used to say it took, 100 years or 1,000 years to build an inch of topsoil. If we do it in a really comprehensive way on our place, we can build an inch in 3 months.
Wow. Celebrating that. That's incredible. That's like, I think some people have that realization around, like it's taken like quite a few years or potentially generations, like worldwide, to deplete the soil, and like nature's so incredible. Like within a couple of years, you can bring it back. So,
well, that's farmers talk to me and they'll complain that it takes 2 or 3 years to get the regenerative type practices going. And so I'll quickly say, so how long did it take you to deplete the soil? And they're like, 150, 200 years. And I said, so then you're complaining that in 2 or 3 years we're building it back. So that's pretty good production in my mind, but I'm not great with math. So
Georgie, did you have a question?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
I wanted to, especially having my dad walk in on us. Yeah, that's classic. My dad, he doesn't understand Zoom meetings. It doesn't matter how many times I tell him, put a note on the door. You just walk in. I need my question answered now, Georgie. But so I think that leads into, you have this real opportunity to farm with your family, and you always have. And I know you spoke a lot, or you and I spoke previous about what that was like and the opportunities basically your family gave you, and now that you're able to sort of pass on to your son and daughter-in-law. And what is it like, in that family relationship, working together, sort of, sometimes it can be, sometimes it can be difficult, but it can also be a really great situation. Can you tell us how your situation works and what that's like?
Well, it's a blessing and a curse all wrapped up in one. My situation was so bizarre compared to most people in agriculture that, by me helping, reduce my dad's debt when I was a teenager, and, starting there and then basically running the farm at 20, there wasn't, it wasn't so much that we had assets given. We had debt that we had to take care of. We had worn out machinery that we needed to replace. What we didn't use, we sold quickly. So what I want to do for my kids is they've got a real understanding that it's harder than I'll get out to make a living on that. It can be done, on smaller amounts of acres, but it's not going to be done from the seat of a tractor or done very easily. My daughter-in-law and my granddaughters, they all help me build fence all the time. And my daughter does too. And anybody I can grab to help build fence is the perfect person to help build fence. But you unroll a quarter mile, you put the posts up and you pull another quarter up and it's work. And if there's one thing that that generation is appreciative of is, we look different for a reason, because we are trying harder. That's not saying we think we're better. We just maybe came at this at a little bit of a disadvantage, you know, because there wasn't, you know, coming out of the 80s and things like that. We've been blessed, but we've had to work very hard to get back to where we're at, and we got a long ways to go. But you know, back to, we don't want more land, just, you know, really to do, because we've only maximized or optimized about 4 acres, so we got a long ways to go.
So appreciating that. And also I jokingly nudged to see if Alyssa would jump in. We'll take all the car background noise and screaming kiddos, but no pressure. I don't know if we can hear her, but that's all good. You guys can see her.
I'm here. Hi. Hi, Del.
How are you? Get to work. Hi, girls.
Guys. Hey.
That's the fence crew right there.
Yep.
So sweet. Thanks for jumping in, Alyssa. Great to meet
No,
you.
of course. Yes, you are Hayden.
Amazing. So
So
good.
what's it like working with that with your father-in-law?
You know, I'm just really glad he likes me. I don't know. I love working with him. I love that he expects everyone around him to work as hard as he does, which is the way that I grew up. So for me, it was just a great fit. And being from California, the only way I learned how to do anything in agriculture is with him. So for me, you know, a lot of the stuff that Del talks about with soil health and with cows is a very common sense approach for me, because it's all I know.
Yeah.
So he's a fabulous teacher. Yeah, we enjoy doing stuff with him, huh? Grampy's taught you lots, hasn't he?
That's great.
Thanks so much, guys. So beautiful to see the whole fam. It's really awesome. Appreciate it. We had one more. I think we have time to squeeze in one more, and it's a juicy one that came through. Paula is really, really curious. This is a tough question, I'll admit. Paula, you're asking some heavy hitters. She's wondering, what were the mistakes or maybe all learning opportunities, as I to euphemize in a bit, but I like it, Paula. And also, I'm kind of confused about this part. What would you include in the 10% change? She kind of asked a lot of questions. Let's start with those two.
Well, I mean, just the knowledge of most things aren't, if it's animals, products, plants, a lot of the things that we had been dealing with for the last 50 or 75 years on the farm were not acclimated to go into a regenerative type program. So it's really reinventing the wheel, if you will, to entice, you know, things to grow again. I'm a firm believer that every seed is still in the soil. We just have to disturb it enough through grazing or applying nutrients, you know, via the animals to bring them back and allow them, you know, like I've said, just let nature do its thing, get out of the way. So there's just so many things that work in a very conventional type system that, you know, nature can't figure out why we were doing that. And so there's just a little lead time in that change. You know, on the 10% question, a lot of our neighbors started to bale graze, where they just put the bales in spots where the soil is poorer and let the cows eat what they want and tromp the rest in, translocate some seed. The funny thing about it is, you know, when you jump them and say, well, you're doing some regenerative stuff, you know, with the grazing now. No, I'm not doing anything regenerative. I just decided that's the way I was going to do it. Well, that's great. It's the same people that will have a field day on a Saturday and they won't come, but on Sunday morning, they'll drive through the place to ask what we talked about, because they don't want other farmers to know that they would have come to that. So 10% can be a lot of different things. It doesn't have to be too many things. 10% on the cow side would be getting your calving season back in sync with nature like we did. No more pulling calves out of snowbanks and things like that, and letting them be born on green grass and things like that. So, one thing starts the whole deal down a really beautiful path.
The snowball effect.
Yep.
Yeah. And hearing that also, the cultural and social and kind of like psychological components of transition, thanks for taking us. That window is potentially fresh to some, and to others, they're probably living it. So appreciate you. I want to wrap things up. If you guys had extra questions, we'll share ways to get in touch. Also, you can stick around in the community roundtable. I know there's so many juicy questions coming through, so there will be time. There will be time. But just as a final moment in kind of chatting with Del as we were preparing, to share his story, and then also for this session, like, what is a best outcome? Like, and I think it really ties well. His answer made me think so expansively, actually, for what is needed, in as far as like catalyzing awareness, and in the most humble of ways. Del, I think you very eloquently said that exposure is just a huge thing. And as much as that can, come across as like, oh, well, share my story, it's like, actually, that is what is needed. Like, share this replay, like drop this link of his story or his website to a friend. Because there's not as many folks as we really need in the world trying to get the word out about how people can transition to this better type of agriculture. And Del, you guys are doing so much work with urban gardens everywhere from, that kind of scale all the way up to large companies through your consulting practice. So it's just a matter of like, really, I think, sharing the good ones and the good stories and the incredible work that you're doing as it comes along. So that's like my little pop for y'all, is share it far and wide. That's an amazing way that you can take some action today. Alongside, I'll drop some links and you guys can go check out Del's website and his shop, ship some of his incredible products to a loved one or try some out yourself. But before we really do wrap up, Del, I'm really curious how this community can support you, and if you have any extra needs, or if we just covered them. Is there anything else you'd like to leave the group with, kind of like that billboard moment?
Well, you touched on a lot of them, what we talked about, earlier. It's getting guys like me, there's more and more people out there. There's maybe not a ton of people with the kind of expertise that we bring through our Graze Master Group, not just with the family, but what we're doing. We have partners, Carrie Hofsnyder and Kirk Peterson, Nate Belcher, and the Graze Master Group that can help when we sit around those tables or in those company boardrooms to really bring that common sense approach. And hey, we're out of time. How do we make this better? It's not so much for you, it's for the next generation. That that's why I get up every day is to it's for that next generation, because if we don't get it right, there's not going to be a future. So it is that exposure, it's boots on the ground. Let people know that we would love to help. We'll travel any place, big or small, whatever, and we would just love to help people, because tomorrow is promised to no one. And we can talk about these practices, but until people see what the ears can't hear, the eyes can't deny. We can talk, but when they come to our place or we come out there and we start showing them what they can do differently, then it really clicks.
So well said. Yeah, and just shouting out also, I mean, your guys' work as bridge builders is incredible. And also I'm seeing in your guys' lived experience, like on your land with your family, you're bridging also youth and elders. And that knowledge transfer, I think, is, horizontally and vertically, it's like, how do we do more of that in a circular sense? So just so deeply commending your incredible work and you bringing your family and now us into the circle of what it is that you're creating in the world. Thank you. Seriously, thank you so much for jumping in today. And also for doing what you are doing. So I shared a bunch of links in the chat. I'd love to put up this nice little end card so y'all can have a sense of how you can follow along with Del on the web and on social. And then also for those of you guys that want to connect with Farmers Footprint a little more deeply, whether that's on our social sharing platforms or just jump into the community and, you know, experience some other chats like this, we're all for it. I mean, I think part of what we're doing here as well is getting a sense of how important every single voice is in the chorus of the change that's needed. So it's so amazing to hear from thought leaders and experts like yourself, Del, and also really uplifting every single voice in this space. So thank you guys for being here. I'm going to drop into the chat just once again ways that everyone can support you, Del. So go ahead and click into those links. Georgie, thank you so much for writing this beautiful piece, for being a part of this conversation today. It's just always such a treat to have your knowledge and just everything come through. I mean, what a beautiful conversation. You guys absolutely rocked it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, Del, back into the wild for you. Georgie, feel free to stick around, or if you've got a job as well. And everyone else, we're going to go ahead and stick around for, we'll just hold the Zoom room open. We've got a few minutes. If we want to kind of like ask the crew, you know, what some of the questions that we didn't get a chance to hang around for, we can ask each other. And if you guys just even wanted to share a little bit of how this session landed, if you want more of this, or if you would love to kind of see, you know, another type of rancher, farmer, just things you guys want to talk about, this is your space. So
Thank you, everyone.
thanks, Del.
I know.
See ya.
Amazing. Cool. Yeah, that was awesome. So beautiful to, I think my favorite part, I don't know if I would love to hear, like, maybe if you guys wanted to share, but just Alyssa and the kiddos up on the mic, like that was so fun. Oh my gosh, it's a family affair over there. I love how they kind of like poked fun at each other too. You can tell they definitely work together. What about anyone else? Any favorites coming through, or do you guys have any other questions? I mean, some amazing questions came through the chat, so I want to hold space to elevate some of those. Jeremy, I see you. What's going on?
Hi, I missed a huge chunk of the middle. I'm so sorry, but thank you, and Georgie, thank you too. That was amazing. I'm relatively new in the space, but all I would say is that there's a lot of not credible voices, as many credible as there are not credible, but just, I think, you know, what this conversation and what he as a person, somebody to send links about, was just so credible in this space for both people who are literally knee deep in farming, but also even, I mean, I'm in technology and in investment, you know, it's a credible voice. And so I'm really grateful for you sharing that.
Yeah, what do you do in you said tech or finance?
Yeah, okay. I head up design for an innovation practice around technology globally, and we have been looking at really just looking at this world that you're painting the picture of, this giant puzzle of pieces, and looking for where the problems to adoption are. Because as technologists, we're seeing perhaps there is a role in testing, to put testing into the hands of the farmers themselves. You know, both that sort of what do you call it, the sort of the aggregate density, I think it is, or potentially carbon sequestering. So we're beginning to imagine, how do we get some of that into the hands of farmers on almost at an app level, perhaps, we're not sure. Just so that again is not a hindrance. We did some work in Europe, in Ireland, around milk, and we discovered that a lot of older farmers may not call themselves techie, but they're very technical. They're very technical. They love understanding things. They love understanding how it works. And so we're trying to think, how can we take away the techie of technology, but make it interesting and engageable as for them. Yeah.
Wow. That's amazing. Yeah, really exciting work, it sounds like. And I love that. How do we take away the techie, but apply and kind of like cater to the fact that they love to be in the weeds? Pun really intended. I think something that interests me too about this space that I've seen done, like it could be done better, and I'm hoping to see really ways come through, is just also like, how do we allow farmers to be in the co-creation or co-ownership of the data that kind of gets flowed through systems like that, so that they can be also really like benefiting if there's kind of like a model around how that educates or informs or pays. How do we put that power into the farmer's hands, and also that risk mitigation too? So that's amazing. Thank you, Jeremy.
No, yeah, you're absolutely right. Just one point on that. I mean,
Yeah.
that sharing of data, say for example, there was artificial intelligence that needed to recognize the different components of healthy soil. The more the data is, the more accurate it's going to become. So definitely this is going to be about everyone benefiting from being involved. Now I'll stop.
Yeah. I actually work in ag tech quite a bit as far as so I've covered a lot of the ag tech type, whether it's digital ag or, you know, robotics, all this sort of exciting things. There's a lot of stuff really interconnected with regenerative ag and ag tech that's going on right now. So it's really fascinating. There's a lot of opportunities. I think the hardest part for the tech side to understand, though, is that agriculture is so incredibly diverse. Like you talked about the sharing of information, they're going to get smarter and smarter and smarter, but there is just so much information to learn. You know, like you mentioned, 4 feet away, one field's different than another field. You know, it's so that's, I think, the challenge for both the sharing of the information and becoming smarter and smarter and smarter can hopefully get us there. But it's also been somewhat problematic when tech companies come in and say, oh, I can solve this problem, but they don't realize how different it is from one farmer's field to the next. So.
And sorry, to that point, I think we're also, what we like to say is we're problem obsessed and solution agnostic. We're very keen to find out, and I'd love more talk on this, to make sure we're solving the right problem. You know, is this is this the one, or is there some other aspect of this which is going to really lift up these communities and these farmers with technology?
And it needs to be actionable. Like you hear that a lot from the farmers too. Like, I don't need more data. I need so many solutions. You know, I need, you know, how much more data can I have? Great, thanks for that information, but I still have a way to fix it, you know, address it. So, yeah.
If I could come in there, Tori, please, and maybe if I can direct this towards Georgie, maybe also. But I think markets and dominance and conglomerates in market control is having a big impact on the farmers. Like I read an article in the New York Times recently, and the meat packers across the US, is it 4 or 5 big meat packers there are?
Yeah,
and even the feedlots can't survive because the meat packers are controlling the supermarkets and the price and everything. So that fits into the whole equation too, I'm sure.
Yeah, I can. You want me to take this one, Tori? Yeah, no, it's a huge problem, especially on the livestock production side. And with beef, what happened during the pandemic is the prices shot through the roof, the retail side prices, right? So if you go and look at all the big meat packers, and there's basically 4 or 5 that control most of the meat in the US and even beyond, but their profits just went through the roof. But the prices were controlled. So at the wholesale level, when those farmers were selling their cattle through the feedlots, their prices were basically repressed down to like some of the lowest, you know, prices that have been around for a long time. So in the meantime, at the same time, all the feed costs went through the roof as well. So those commodity prices for like corn and soy and all that sort of stuff, that has gone really high. In fact, those farmers, at least last year, made a lot of money on that. But the livestock farmers who needed to purchase product, they really lost their shirt through COVID, and it's just been really difficult. And I know, like in the Biden administration, they're like looking into like they're investigating it as far as, what do they call it? You know, controlling the market practices and seeing if they can do anything about that. But it becomes super political, right? Because then we get into this big argument over whether, oh, do we want to, you know, control these companies, and it becomes this big, you know, and all that gets so complicated with the politics. And I think, you know, whether side of the politics you're coming from the US at least, I think most people are like aligned on that sort of issue. Like all the ranching beef community, which is fairly, you know, it's mostly pretty conservative politically, they are just crying about the prices and saying that these companies are basically really taking advantage of them. So, you know, I think there's things that need to happen on a political level to sort of break up those monopolies. That would help a lot. From a local level, it's hard, and we talked about it more in the written story, but Dell, and they started selling their beef directly. So the beef that they raise, so they basically sell their genetics, people, and, you know, and Dell has consulting services, right? But they also have their own beef, but they sell it directly locally. So that gave them an option where they were no longer stuck in this, like, having to sell through the feedlots and being subjected to whatever price that was. And that is an option that more and more farmers are trying to move towards, but it's not easy, and it requires having a consumer base that will buy your product. And there's, you know, it gets really complicated. Like, you know, in our area, for instance, there's not enough local slaughter facilities. So if you want to do that, it's incredibly hard to be able to do that, to find like the place to take your animals to be able to harvest. It's just, those are places also, I know the Biden administration put some money towards to try and create more local processing facilities that can help open up that and because that's really stopping a lot of farmers who would prefer to do more regenerative, more local based sales, but they can't get their animals. There's no place to get their animals slaughtered or even have somebody come to their farm, because they're just not available anymore. So those are some of those, political, you know, infrastructure issues that are trying to be addressed, and definitely do damper the solutions a lot, for sure.
So how much of a barrier is there? Like, do the big ag slaughterhouses have people like Dell on their radar saying, we don't want them to threaten our stranglehold on the market? Because I know that's a big barrier here in Vermont too. And in New Hampshire, there's not enough slaughterhouses, the small ones that, I mean, they just have more work than they can possibly do. So if a bunch, you know, people like Dell started mushrooming all over the place, how much of a threat, and how, you know, I would think that it wouldn't be, there must be some political reason why there aren't more small slaughterhouses sprinkled around. And like, it's even illegal to do your own slaughter on farm, which I find absolutely absurd. But even in Vermont, it's, you know, there's just so many blocks to, you know, being able to raise your own animals and slaughter them the way you wish. I mean, that's probably FDA stuff, but you know, we totally, like, I would never touch a piece of meat in a supermarket. You couldn't pay me enough. I have to know where it's from, what the practices are. And I think people are more and more, well, it's person by person, you know, but it just seems like a big challenge. And also I feel like, you know, cows are not meant to eat corn. They're not meant to eat things that nature, you know, it's like, it goes against nature. So how do we also educate people? If you eat pastured animal, you know, beef, it's like 1,000 times better for your health. And would people care if they learned that? And how do we teach them? They're like, I've been trying forever to try and figure out how to educate more people, because big ag, I just learned that they spend more money lobbying than even big oil. I mean, I was kind of shocked. I was like, that is so wrong. And it affects people's health, and it's linked to the healthcare system. So are they funded by big hospitals. I mean, it's just like you start to think like there's something wrong with this system
Yeah.
to the core.
Yeah.
But anyway, I'll shut up now.
You bring up a really amazing point, Suzanne, and it's not something that I feel like people in this community are shy about. It's like, what are the systems that are undergirding and creating the conditions for the agricultural system that we all are, if you're not asking questions, unintentionally taking part in, And it's, even if you are asking questions, it's sometimes really challenging to find a local solution. So it's, I think a piece of it that's increasingly interesting to me is the policy aspect, exactly like you're saying. And it's going to be an amazing conversation in the next, year and a half or so with the Farm Bill coming up in 2023. There's some groups that are doing interesting work, and actually we have a book club and we've read some really cool books in it, but as a group, we're going to read basically like a back of the napkin, like what is the Farm Bill book next, so that we can kind of get like,
cool.
yeah, so we can get a little group literacy around what is happening. Because I think you're right. It's like there's such incredible steps that a consumer can take around, education and awareness. And there's still gaps in that, I think, as well, because right now the system is set to subsidize not conventional practices, essentially. If we can be evening out the price that consumers are paying by subsidizing a more sustainable way to farm and ranch, that also, I think, is a barrier that we need to figure out how to overcome so that it's accessible to all. It's the norm in a supermarket, rather than you having to do a ton of extra work and that burden being unduly placed on consumers. So I'm with you. I think there's agency in it from a consumer standpoint to like take care of your health, take care of your family, hopefully engage with your local community, like Del was saying. And then also I think there's a duty or an invitation on that individual level to, sign your name on some level on, being a part of that more macro change.
Yeah.
And that's the US. Like then we start to look at the global thing and all the complexity in that. So it's like, start where you are. And if you guys are not in the US, like I know some of you guys aren't, it's always really, really fascinating. I think only enriches the conversation when we can get a little bit more of that global perspective on what's happening in other countries, and what the nuances of those political systems and agricultural systems, the overlay between them. So that's where I sit. And I don't want to, maybe if there's a response to that, and then I want to wrap up just to be considerate of everyone's time.
Cool. I guess all I would say is I agree, Tori, and I think that what Del said about 10% chance on the 10% change on the farm, just 10% change in what we choose to eat, as far as who we support, can make a huge difference. Because the thing we have to understand about the agricultural system and the way it is now, because a lot of times you hear people that just sort of want to blow it all up, take all the land back, do it all cooperatively, blah, 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 do all this sort of stuff. Get rid of the subsidies, which I personally hate. But our whole economic structure is basically built around our agricultural, riches, and essentially the whole idea of this production and cheap food. So we can't just simply we look at all these problems this caused, but yet you can't just blow it all up, because people would starve, so if somebody's starving, they don't really care if their meat was pasture fed, that's the reality. So we have to do, as much as frustrating it is and as hard as it is to change things, we have to do it little bit by little bit, because you can't just blow up the system, because people still need to eat. So I think that's something we always have to keep in mind. And that's one of the things that's really cool about regenerative practices, even though there is, like Phil mentioned, there can be this sort of, dividing lines between, is that organic, and a conventional farmer, might feel like, they don't want to that's not them. That's all these, hippie farmers or whatever, these crazy people, right? And that are doing this and they're ridiculous or whatever. There is some of those lines, but regenerative ag is really starting to cross a lot of those lines, and start to bring people together, I think, whether it's a smaller scale biodynamic farmer or a larger farmer like Del, and he's able to go and talk to these bigger farmers and get them to talk, understand. And that's what's, I think, to me, the most exciting thing about regenerative ag. is it starts to bring like all the agricultural community together. And that's when we talk about like no-till practices, which really has had a huge impact, even though a lot of those farmers are still using chemicals, but maybe a lot less. You know, they're starting to it's starting to move in the direction we want to go. So that's super exciting.
Yeah, +1 on all of that, Georgie. And Gabe Brown, if y'all haven't run across his work.
Yeah.
He has a beautiful story too, that through regenerating the soil with cattle, he completely revitalized like a ghost desert, tiny little rural town. So wow, rich, so rich. I feel full with all of this goodness. Georgie, thanks for sticking around and dropping the mic as you always do. Great questions. And Suzanne and Sean and Jeremy and everyone else. Wow, just beauty. Always, always more. I'd love to close it out. We've been kind of playing around with just this little invitation or offering or whatever you want to call it. But yeah, I mean, we have these rich conversations, and I feel like a piece of it, for me at least, is there's so much information that we get. And I feel like practicing gratitude a bit can be really helpful for me to like walk away with kind of like a nugget of like, yeah, that was cool. That landed with me. So if anyone feels called to just put in the chat, yeah, if something stood out to you, or if you feel like you received a gift from this conversation today in any way, it can be really inspiring to read ways that you guys get inspired or are kind of interacting with each other. So we'll hang out for a minute, and thank you guys so much for joining. I'd love to read what gifts came through for you. Awesome. And in the meantime, I dropped some notes in the chat just around, I think we're up here. If you guys do want to stay updated on the book club, here's the link. Like I said, we're going to be reading that policy book next. And then we're going to start doing these Farmside chats. We're picking them back up again at a quicker clip. So if you guys are stoked to get a chance to ask farmers more questions, there's going to be a lot more of these coming through. Also in that events page, anything that you're seeing with the Farmers Footprint logo on there is a community event specifically for this community. But it's wide open. Invite your friends, invite your lovers, invite your coworkers. And we do 2 of them. One of them might be particularly interesting to you guys on a regular basis. So each Tuesday we meet and have like the land stewards focus conversation. We've been getting like anywhere from like 10 to 20-ish folks in there on a regular basis, and it's really rich. And then the other one that we do is it's bi-weekly. Every 2 weeks we'll talk about food as medicine. So kind of same sense. That's a huge just passion for a lot of folks in this community as well. So looking to increase that. If you guys have any suggestions, other things you want to put on the docket to talk about for a one-off or a regular basis, we're all ears. This is your community. We're just facilitating it. So huge gratitude, guys. Appreciate you spending time, and enjoy the rest of your Thursday. It's almost the weekend. Here we go. Woohoo. Bye, guys.
Georgie, take care.
Bye,
Look at these gifts, by the way. Have a read if you don't have to jump right away. Woo-hoo. All right, guys, I'm going to close it out. Cheers.